Gloria is so nice. And nice she is. We both, when we met the other day, and we're like, I'm like, I really value kindness and compassion and being, just being nice to people. And she takes her camera and she pans it over and on the wall. She goes, look at my values. And they're up on the wall. There was kindness as values. I'm like, all right, we can work together.
All right, so we are now recording, so I'm going to do my spiel. So good morning, afternoon. Someone said it's 1 p.m. Eastern time, so afternoon to y'all over there. And thank you so much for coming in and joining us for another Coffee and CEU. It's already October, oh my goodness. So before we get to our main event, I do just have a few housekeeping items I do want to go over. So this event is being recorded, and it's going to be uploaded into our DBA page after the event. If you are here for CEUs, just make sure to stay in the entire event. I'm going to be monitoring the attendance throughout the presentation, so that's how I'm going to make sure you were attending. And then after the presentation, you're going to get a short survey through your email. So make sure to fill that out. That's how we're going to be able to send you your certificate for 1 BACB Type 2 Learning CE. And since we are monitoring the attendance, if you can just make sure on the Zoom display page, if you can just make sure your full name is displayed so I can cross-reference. And if you're logging in through a phone, if you can please just email us and let us know. We're at disseminateaba@gmail.com. So if you could just send us your phone number used, your full name, and your email. And lastly, just to limit some background noise, if you could please mute yourself. It's going to help everyone have the best experience possible. And of course, our fundraiser is still on. So all of our proceeds go directly to our dissemination grant. So if you can, if you want to check out and get some cool things, this is seriously my favorite thing in the morning. It's my nifty mug for my caffeine. So if you want to pick some stuff up, I will send that in the chat. So if you can check it out. So
you guys see my mug? I'm not sure if you can say that on here. It says bad words.
Oh boy.
Anybody see that? It's my favorite. They're kind of X'd out and stuff. I want to get one with Skinner that has Skinner on that, and it says the same thing, but y'all MFers need behavior science. That's what everybody really needs, right?
I love that. Oh man, we got to get that into our Cafe Press site.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I think that's enough for me, all the housekeeping stuff. I will link all of that in the chat just in case you've missed it. And so let's move on to why you're actually here. So today's presentation is just going to be a tad more interactive. So feel free, go use the chat, ask any and all questions you have for our presenter. And I think it might be a little bit more fun if you turn on your cameras, but of course, no pressure with that. And so now, without further ado, I get to pass you on to Dr. Gavoni.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here. I love talking shop, so to speak. And when I was originally planning for this, I had done like the normal deck so I can share. And I thought, well, the other week I actually presented and I went off I went off my norm and didn't really do a deck. And I found it being organic, people seem to enjoy it more. And I hope you do. If you don't, give me some feedback on it. Be like, listen, never do that again. Do a PowerPoint and go all the way through it. But I do have a little bit of PowerPoint. But I want to share with you some of the material. I made sure that, I made sure to talk to Gloria about it ahead of time because originally when I was thinking about the deck, it was going to be about like, all right, specifically, what am I doing? I'm still going to talk about some of those things with the what I'm doing, of course, as training and coaching. I know that you guys are coming to hear that stuff, but also this SIG is about disseminating, and disseminating is very near and dear to my heart. I feel that this is the greatest science in the world, and what I say is case in point. What, of course, we're biased, everybody in here, I'm sure, but what science can improve other sciences by improving the performance of the respective scientists, right? So I really, really do believe applied behavior analysis, the science of human behavior, is the greatest science in the world. And it makes me a little bit sad that it's not everywhere. In fact, I don't just get sad, I get like frustrated with it. Sometimes I feel frustrated with our field because we have a science and we're not using the science to disseminate. because that's just another outcome. There's behaviors that are linked with disseminating, and I think we need to do a better job of that. And I know that that Gloria had dropped somewhere a link to an article that I wrote some years back. It's called "Fighting Words in ABA." And I wrote that out of frustration, as I did a lot of things that I wrote, because like I just wanted to vent. And what I want is that for everybody in here, when you walk into somewhere, people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're a behavior analyst. That's amazing." Thanks. I'm glad that you guys are here. Or like your children, the younger generation, saying when they grow up one day, with whether they always want to be a teacher or doctor or lawyer or whatever, police officer, that they want to be behavior analyst. And I think that should be part of people's thoughts, because this is a great field. It's the science of helping, as I like to say. So disseminating is very important to me. And so I popped up these the books on the screen. I'm not trying to sell you guys books or anything. I don't, if you, by the way, if you ever want to author and you're doing it, don't do it because you think you're going to make money on it. I didn't do it that way. You make like pennies on the dollar. There's like zero money to make in it. I think I probably owe money for writing books, because all the time I do it because it's a labor of love, and I really do like to share, but my knowledge and how I see things through my eyes. I know we're going to talk about behavior karma right now. That's a big disseminating thing, but I'm going to get into MMA science in a second. But I want to like let you, when you guys walk away from here, like for whatever I've done, I know that you guys probably know more about, most of you guys have a lot more about the science than I do. So I just want to like let you know where I feel like I am in the science. All right, let me get down here. Did I do it? Hold on. I gotta move forward. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, all right. This is how I kind of see myself, right? I see the field. Now, the science is big. It's deep, very deep. And you have like researchers down here. And thank God that we have researchers, because researchers provide integrity to our field. Without the researchers, there would be no field, right? And so they're doing, like, to me, all the dirty work. And they love doing that stuff, man. I call some of these, guys and gals the rat whisperers, because they're in there and they're fine. They're getting data, man. They're telling us all the good things that we need to do, and we're taking it and we're doing some, helpful things with it. But I'm not that. I'm not that. I've been engaged in research. I've published research. Probably some of it's not so great. But there is some research coming out. Actually, in Dr. Nick Wedler and I did some stuff, and a couple other people on coaching. I'll be proud of that one. Hopefully, it gets accepted into one of the journals. So excited, but that's not me. And then here's where most people are, right? In the science. These are like the practitioners, and a lot of folks are like clinical practitioners, and they have a good grasp of the science, maybe not as deep as the researchers, right? And maybe they don't understand all the philosophical underpinnings and all the deep parts of the research, but they get it and they apply it and they do it really well. So I mean, I'm not there either. This is me up here, um, right up here, and I feel like I'm kind of like at the very surface, and I know enough. I know enough to make a difference, and I'd like to bring it to the general public. Right, the tip of the iceberg is what all the general public needs. I've made a difference in just various places with what I'll call just a spoonful of science. It doesn't take much to make a difference in my eyes. At least what I've done it, and it just wasn't that deep. It's nothing that you guys don't already know. If you are certified, even if you're if you're an RBT and you have a good grasp of the science at least a certain level, you can make a big difference just with with a little bit of science. So I just don't want anybody to think like I'm deep into the research. I'm not. And by the way, if there's researchers in here, and I know that there are, um, I'd be happy to work with you and learn from you. I'm happy to do that, and I respect you very much. But I'm up here. That's what I'm doing. I consider myself definitely a practitioner, and I'd like to practice kind of OBM, performance management. What I'm doing, I feel like it's very palatable to people. And there's a great article by Richard Fox. If you guys ever have a chance to read it, it's called "Translating the Covenant: The Behavior Analyst as an Ambassador and Translator." And I kind of feel like some of our job isn't just to apply the science, but it's to help other people understand some of the practical application of it so they can help themselves, right? I always think that good behavior analysts help people, great behavior analysts help people help themselves, but the best behavior analysts help people understand some of the basic principles of science so they can help themselves and other people, right? Maybe some like pivotal behaviors linked to the science, just simple things, right? So, Richard Fox said some individuals are better disseminators and change agents. That's I'm one of those individuals, and maybe some of you guys are out there that you might be one of those individuals. And I bring this up because when when I first came in the field, I thought, man, I'm a loser. I'm not going to conferences. I'm not reading enough of the material, and I need to be better at it, And I did. I'll walk you through some of the things that I did to become better at it because you do have to have, somewhat of a grasp of the science. Of course, I'm not saying I don't. I definitely do. I've written about it, But what I'm saying is like you don't have to have the knowledge that our researchers do. We respect them, but we have to take what they give us and be able to apply it and be able to help people make sense of it. And for me, and maybe some of you guys were like this. Somebody said to me, "Hey, they got this class. If you go down there and take this class, you can like double your income." I'm like, all right, well, I'm broke. I own a house, and I graduated college, and I was making like no money at all. And so I went down there and took this course. And when I walked in, it was under Dr. Steven Starrin. It was in 2004. And it was before, like, it was where you were required to take your coursework from the university. And since then, by the way, I've gone back to FIT and finished, but this was my BCABA. It just made sense to me when I saw him. Like, I kind of knew this was a thing, but like, wow, man, this makes sense, So I'm very kind of natural in the way I approach things, natural as you can be, because it's still science and you still need data, et cetera, et cetera. So when it was there, it was like an aha for me. This was this aha moment. It was like, all right, there's actually a conceptual framework for this. So it's good. So I wish I had understood the science back in the day because the first time that I walked into a boxing gym, I went through some of my struggles early in life, and I don't recommend to people that they just walk into a boxing gym and jump in the ring with a professional fighter, because I did. And I literally remember climbing through the ropes and thinking that Mad Max theme was going through my head. It's like 2 men enter, 1 man leave, or something like that. You remember like Beyond Thunderdome, whatever that was called? And 2 men entered, 1 man left with a broken nose. That, of course, is me. And I just got my nose fixed this past year after 25 years. But I was thrown in there and I took a beating, man. This guy beat the crap out of me. I remember like catching him with a lucky punch, and he just came after me. And I have a big old head, so like he couldn't knock me out. So all that meant was I just took more of a beating. And so I remember walking out that way and thinking, man, there's got to be a better way to teach people and to learn. And I think that, and of course I've learned later on that there certainly is. And a lot of people don't know how to develop skills. They don't know how to help those skills transfer into the natural environment. But as behavior analysts, we do. We have the ultimate toolbox for coaching, for managing, for leading, for being a parent, anything that you want to do, you have this toolbox. It's right. It's applied behavior analysis. It's an amazing thing. And I remember thinking like, I wonder how many potential world champions walk through the door only to take a beating like I did and never to come back, right? Thinking that I ain't got what it takes, which that's not true. We know what happened for a lot of people are coming in there and they get punished for coming, right? It's a big punisher to get a broken nose. And for whatever was going on in my life at the time, because I was struggling with my own personal issues, for me being in that gym was more of a reinforcer than the aversiveness of taking a beating and picking blood boogers out of your nose for weeks. That's gross, right? It's true. It was not good. My nose ended up, when I got it fixed, they told me it was repaired 8 times or broken 8 times. So this isn't just in the fight game. This happens all the time. I've worked in education, and I make the analogy here that so many educators are dropped into schools unprepared to meet the demands of the classroom. So many school leaders are dropped into schools unprepared to meet the demands of schools. This happens in organizations all the time because I don't feel like higher education is doing such a hot job developing people skills, right? And getting those skills again transfer into that natural environment. I'll talk about that a little bit when we go through some of the MMA science stuff. But we can help in that. There's some research. I can't remember names, and you can just probably Google it yourself. But that cites that a lot of organizations are only getting like 10% return on investment in terms of their training. So what's that mean? Well, it means that while it's terrible for them and all the wasted money that's happening in the business world or wherever you go, it means that there's a great opportunity for behavior analysts to go in there and make a difference anywhere, because we are able to see those nuances. We are able to like take a look. We can teach people to assess. We can identify pivotal behaviors. We can teach people not just to collect data, but how to use it, how to shape behavior, the importance of using positive reinforcement over negative reinforcement when you can. Not that I say we can't ever use negative reinforcement to get performance. Of course we can, but identifying those kind of pivotal behaviors or critical behaviors. And we can help people be more productive, live a valued life, all this stuff with the science of human behavior. So like I knew then there was a better way, and I came across that, better way, unfortunately about 10 years later. But I had gotten to the field of, I started in social work, and I started in social work because I wanted to help people, and helping people is a value of mine. And if you guys are in here, you came into behavior analysis and you probably share a similar value, that helping people is a reinforcer for you. I hope that it is. And sometimes I think in the field we forget that this field is about people, and it's about treating people with dignity and respect, and it's about helping not just our clients or learners, the people that we're working with, but it's also about helping each other. We also are learners in this field. We also are trying to become better ourselves, and the more that we help each other, the more that we can help other people. So yeah, I look at it as a science of helping. So I went into social work, and then I learned about this behavior analysis stuff, and I'd like to pair that, because again, I always thought about social work as being like heavy in heart and light in science. And when I first came into science, I'm like, man, what is going on? Like, I felt like, I don't know. There just seemed to be like, and I write about this in the Fighting Words in ABA. And I'm not saying you guys have had the same experience. I'm just telling you about what my experience was. From my experience when I went in, it felt like there was almost like a classism within the field. And I didn't like it, because I don't care what initials are by your name. I don't care how much money you have, kind of cars you drive. I don't care what kind of power you have. I'm not going to judge you by that. I'm going to judge you by how you treat other people. That's the biggest thing to me. And I really don't. And you'll see that. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're treating people well, I'm going to like you a lot. If you're not, I'm not going to like you a lot. And and maybe we can talk about it, because maybe you're not aware of like the impact of your behavior on others, because people tend to be poor observers of the behavior, poor observers of the impact of the behavior on the environment, and poor observers of the impact of the environment on their behavior. This is very, and behavior analysts fall into this as well. They tend to take off this behavior analytic lens, right, which is not good. Well, um, how I ended up starting to apply the science, and I'll talk about, again, this is all moving on to applying it in mixed martial arts. I was thrown into a school that was a high poverty school. It's a perfect storm, I call it. It was brand new administrators, brand new students, and like all first and second year teachers from like Iowa. And the teachers were the students were brand new, because they had ended busing. That the area was under court order before segregation, and that ended, and they decided they wanted to bring the kids back to the community school. And they didn't read the research, because there's some good research that supports diversifying the socioeconomic makeup of a school can have a really positive impact on all sorts of different metrics. And so the top blew off. Like, the kids had taken over the school, and it was crazy. Like, teachers were crying, kids were running up and down the hallway. It was just not good. So at the end of the year, I would go out there like once a week, and because I was a crisis management guy, there were fights, and they loved having me out there, because I was in a position where the kids were fighting. I would try to block. I'd end up in restraints, and they wanted to use me as a bouncer. I'm like, I'm not here as a bouncer. That's not what I want to do. I hate being in restraints with these guys. This is a bad thing. I know that if we had a better environment, structure the environment better, we wouldn't get this. And they had this stuff called school-wide positive behavior support, which I personally like it. I look at it as the first large-scale application of OBM in schools, just that they didn't have the full loop. They didn't have OBM all the way to the top, because you have to have it from the superintendent down to the executive directors, the principals. Like, you just can't isolate it. There's got to be contingencies all the way up, and they didn't have it. So the superintendent or assistant superintendent came to me and said, "Hey, can you help out in this school? Help turn it around?" I thought, "No, what the hell am I going to do here? It's a mess." And I thought, well, I am a behavior analyst and I should be able to. And there's probably behavior analysts are doing this everywhere. Remember, I told you I wasn't in the field. I was not going to conferences. I wasn't educating myself. And I said to one of my colleagues, I said, "Hey, they have a school-wide PBS, but I think they really need like PBS for adults, because like if we're going to help the kids, we got to get adults to do something." And she said, "Well, there is something like that. It's called Bring Out the Best in People by Dr. Aubrey Daniels." And so I picked up the book, and if you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it. And I said, "Well, this makes sense. It's kind of like all the stuff that I learned in my coursework. Okay, let me go out and try this." And so I tried some stuff but I was selfish. I was selfish when I tried it because like there were 40 classrooms. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to change around 40 classrooms. What the hell am I going to do there? There's behavior popping off everywhere. But I might be able to change this arrival time. Like when kids get off the bus and go to the cafeteria, like that's a tough time, man. It's starting the day off right. I'm thinking they're getting overly aroused. Maybe I can change that up, right? I would like to say I was doing it because like, all right, this is the way that we need to do things. Because it's going to make sense later on because you're going to get buy-in and, you're going to prove, you're going to pair it with the science and show that the science can actually work. But no, that was not it. It was just a reinforcer to me. Like, I'm like, at least I can do this thing. And when I did that using some of the basic OPM principles, it had a ripple effect across the entire school because we applied those simple things: stand at your post, greet kids, ask how their day was. If they run, don't just say walk, have them stop and walk back. Well, then within a week, and me walking around thanking teachers for being there and pumping out a little bit data at the end of the day, for talking about how many teachers were at their post, how I saw them giving out tokens, et cetera, et cetera. Like I was end up pairing with that stuff. I ended up getting like stimulus control over the teachers because when they saw me, I was like, hey, I got to not forget to praise the kids. I got to not forget to be behaviorally specific. Just a couple of critical behaviors we did. And it had this positive ripple effect. And so I ended up writing a book on this with Manny Rodriguez called Quick Wins because it ended up being quick win. It was something that required low response effort and it had a large and meaningful impact that was very visible to people there. And by doing that, it helped me when I wanted to go in and ask people to do something that was a little bit more challenging. It gave buy-in, right? They believed in me and they believed in the science a little bit more because we were able to make some change, if that makes sense. So then I started thinking like, well, I have this stuff and I'm actually transitioning from being a fighter to a coach now. I was still during like, it's hard for going from being a fighter to coach. And I started like, well, I could probably use this in fighting, And so I did start to use it in fighting. And in fact, this is where I started to realize that people in our field, and if you're like me, you're one of those people, or maybe you've gotten past this. I might have just been a slow learner. We tend to get this thing called what I call behavioral myopia, right? My colleague and I, Nika, call it that, behavioral myopia. And that is we forget. It's like we only put on our behavioral lens when we are working with our learners or our clients. And then when we go to work with other adults, our colleagues, the people, we take it off and we start engaging in the blame game. Like, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? They need to step up and do their job, but we should never, ever, ever, ever take the behavior lens off because there's a reason they're not performing well. And in order to get better performance out of them, we have to adjust the environment. And we can't forget that. I remember when I first came into Brett Denovi Associates, there was somebody and the person ended up, they're not there now. And they weren't doing anything with learners, but they were taking money in a ways, right? I'm not going to give like details on it, but they're taking money. And somebody brought it to Brett's attention, said, like, you need to fire this guy. It's like, well, I'm not going to fire them. Like we set up an environment that increased the likelihood that they're going to take that money. We need to go back and adjust that environment and give them a chance and reteach and do some things. And that's what he did. He kept on his behavior lens, even under that. And I'm not saying that if somebody takes a lot of money, you should never fire them. And there was like a little bit of punishment that was involved in it, corrective actions that we took, but we had to adjust the environment because we got, that environment produced that very behavior. And so I started going and looking at what I was doing that was successful through a behavioral lens. And, here's kind of some of the things that I came up with. I'm like, all right, well, one of the things I'm doing is I'm engaging in some sort of skill acquisition. I'm training these guys. I'm giving them a heavy repetition and I'm breaking this stuff down into very small behaviors, right? So I can train those and I'm chaining them together. So what I essentially was doing was like a task analysis. just a simple task analysis of behavior. And I was identifying. Now, remember, I didn't research that I'm going to go do this research. I was just looking at like what I was done that came intuitive to me, and then framing it through like a behavioral lens. And so I was like, all right, well, what behaviors did I teach them? I'm like, oh, well, those would be, that's a pivotal behavior because that's getting them in touch with more learning opportunities, more reinforcement for them. And that over here might be a behavioral cusp because they're able to go to different areas with it. It's getting them, they're copying all sorts of good things as a result of this. And so then I took a look at, well, why are these guys doing so well outside of the cage and not inside of the cage? Like they look really good when they're hitting the bag. They look really good when they're hitting mitts, but they weren't. Well, because I've got to create conditions where they can get repetitions under variable conditions, right? They're not in a cage. Nobody's, or the ring. Nobody's saying, well, here comes the punch. Here comes the kick, right? They've got to respond automatically, fluently under those dynamic conditions. Does that make sense to everybody? And so far, and by the way, to this point, I've been like puking all over you guys with my stuff. Are there any questions right now that'd be pertinent to anything that I said so far, Gloria, that I want to stop and address, or any comments that we want to address? Or
Nothing, no questions so far. Everyone's just really excited about how we can use the science in MMA, and little spoonfuls can
yeah,
make
just
big
so,
changes.
okay. All right, cool. So then I would see this stuff. Now imagine that I'm talking about generalization now. If you train somebody in one environment and you don't set up so they're going to get in touch with some sort of reinforcement in another environment, that's not going to generalize. And hitting the bag, hitting mitts, engaging in shadow boxing outside of the cage is far different aspect. I will train them to fluency outside of that, but I got to create safe conditions where they can apply these skills again under that variability. And so to do that, I was like, all right, well, what am I doing here? And I realized that, well, I would, if I was, if somebody, I really wanted them to use the jab, which is a pivotal behavior in mixed martial arts and boxing. I would put them in the cage, and all they were allowed to do was throw the jab. And I'd made sure they had a defense. Maybe all the other opponent was able to do was either defend or throw their own jab. And they can only do it, like, say, at 50%, right? Because we'd soon increase that rate. And of course, that's not an exact amount. I'm like, go half power. And so take a little video of it and have them engage in it, stop them, ask them a question about it, right? Because I don't want to engage, I don't want to increase prompt dependency, because I need them to be able to think for themselves and engage in the problem solve and make decisions in my absence, and until it becomes automatic, right? Because that's fluency. And then we chain other behaviors on. Right now it's the jab and the cross. Now it's the jab, the cross, and the hook. And pretty soon these guys, their learning was really accelerating. And not only was it accelerating, but it was also it was safer for them. In one of my articles I wrote, somebody like said something which happens in our field, like, well, please explain to me how it's ethical training fighters using the science of human behavior. I'm like, man, do you understand how much I went into the gym and took a beating? And I don't know, I mean, I might have brain damage from that. That's not a good thing. I got hurt, and people are hurting other people. And it's not that people aren't good, they're good people, but because they don't understand how to develop skills, how to safely develop skills. I mean, this is combat sports, so it's not, you just can't. The people are learning despite the coach, despite the trainer, because they're getting in touch with reinforcement, like avoiding the punch the wrong way. And that's a temporary reinforcer, but it's not putting them in a position where they can do the things that they need to do, and they can keep them safe, and et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense to everybody? If they can make a comment so far or nod their head, that's awesome. And I can't see everybody. Okay, cool. Yeah, I see the head nodding. Cool. And so that's what I started doing. And as you can see here, there's a lot of like these, there's world champions up here, UFC fighters up here. I've been to Italy and Russia and the UK, and I have champions all over the place. And in the field in MMA, ended up taking on the moniker of Paulie gloves. You guys probably, some people were like, well, I didn't know that. Like, I've gone to check into hotel rooms, and they're like, we have with Paulie gloves, you're checking in. Like, no, that's actually not my real name. My real name is Paul Gavoni. So if you've seen me post things, 'cause I do, that's just because that's that just happens to be like my Facebook page, what I use, but I came by that name for my one of my fighters. But here's a cool thing, right? So just to show that the ABA is the undisputed champion in MMA, this guy right here, that's Kenny Deuce Garner. Now, when I got with Kenny Deuce Garner, he was 1-2 as a fighter. And I had to take a look at him and think, well, you can't train everybody the same, right? So we don't go in and do the same thing with learners, right? Or our clients. We have to take a look at where they're at. We have to do an assessment of what they're doing well. We have to know what might be some good, better behaviors, right? Some target behaviors that they can engage in. That's going to get them in touch with reinforcement. Now, some of the reinforcements for fighters, like getting hit less, that's a medium reinforcer, right? Might be a negative reinforcer, but performing well in the gym, and ultimately that leads to this stuff, that's later down the road, a bigger goal, or they want to get paid, they want lots of attention from fans, they want to become the world champion, but to do that, we have to do different things. And Kenny Deuce is a shorter guy for his weight class, which is heavyweight, right? He's like 6'1". Well, the guys we were fighting were like 6'7", 6'5", 6'4". So you have to think about, well, he can't fight the same as these guys fight. So I have to figure out, and I came up with like a classification system based on, and I could say like, this is just how we get people in touch with reinforcer. The reinforcer being able to engage in some behavior that's successful for them, slipping a punch and getting a hook off, rolling on or throwing it too. So I had to look at his body type and make it what I would call fighter centric, right? Assessing his needs, equipping with him with things that are going to work for them. And so essentially I would look for an exemplar who's built like Kenny. Who can I get to fight like him? And the obvious one for me was Mike Tyson. And so I studied Mike Tyson. I broke his behavior down to very small behaviors, chained them together, and I started training him in very high repetition. I did all the things I said before, where I would just get him to engage in lots of repetition. I'd pick one or two behaviors, put him in the cage with somebody. They might just throw only hooks at him. And he had to do high repetition with just rolling under the hooks, and then would be roll under the hooks and counter with something. And he was successful. And we went on to capture the heavyweight championship of the world. And if you can see here, can you guys see who that guy is right there? Anybody know who that is? Can they type it in if they know who that is? Or did they type it in Gloria? I need to see here.
Rachel and Sonia are saying
Yep.
Putin.
Yep, that's Vladimir Putin, right? Now, I'm not celebrating Putin at all, but this is, perhaps one of the most powerful, certainly one of the most powerful men in the world. And that's Deuce calling. By the way, I'm right off the side here. There's a video. You can see the video of this. That's Deuce calling Putin over to the ring, yo, Putin, come here, and saying, yo, Putin, throw up your deuces. So that's got nothing to do with anything, but it's freaking cool, man. It's Vladimir Putin, man. But none of this would have happened without the science of human behavior. It's not me, it's the science. This could have never happened without me having a basic understanding of some principles. I didn't say anything that was outrageous. I pinpointed a couple behaviors. We had some metrics. And by the way, the metrics sometimes were just contrast. It was just like, did that feel better to you? And oh God, man, nobody please come at me for saying the word feeling, right? We can remember thoughts and feelings are covert behaviors, right? These private events are covert behaviors. We have to help people recognize that there's a difference in what they're doing. Are you hitting harder because of that? Now, in combat sports, they need metrics. You don't think for a second, I wish I didn't have metrics everywhere. So when somebody engaged in the behavior, it was pumping back that metric right away as feedback so we could adjust what they're doing. If my fighter could see they were hitting harder, faster, anything based on what I was telling them, that's going to be a big reinforcer for them. So they're going to want to do it even when I'm not there. My goal as a coach in the absence of that stuff is to get them to do stuff long enough until they see themselves engaging in that and producing successful outcomes independent of me. And that comes with sparring. And the sparring is our simulations, right? It's connecting the skill to the natural environment. The natural environment is the actual fight, right? So the simulations is where you need to make this stuff work to the best of your ability. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Okay, cool. All right, now let me keep moving through here. That's Putin. Oh, so anyways, after I did that stuff, going back to a little bit of dissemination, like I started just writing because I like writing. And I didn't used to like writing, but when I sat my doctoral program, they forced me to write. And what I found was I don't have, my doctorate is in education and organizational leadership. And of course, with my knowledge of organizational behavior management, that came from reading Aubrey's book, reaching out to Dr. Ken Wagner, who was Aubrey Daniels' senior vice president at the time, and saying, hey, I love what you guys say. I love how you have to say it. And we collaborate on some stuff. They gave me a scholarship. And I'm saying that to you because don't be afraid to reach out to people, just ask them questions or say, hey, I love what you did, or whatever it is. But I started finding that people outside the field, when you start talking about the science in a way that's palatable to them, they embrace it. They love it. And we're here. This is a DBA SIG. If we're going to disseminate, we have to make things palatable to people. We have to speak in language that's okay for them. We have to not say, well, that's wrong. What you're saying is wrong. We have to find out what's right about what they're saying, right? And pair our science with it and maybe give them a tool that if they use it, they produce some sort of positive outcome as a result. So instead of trying to coerce people in there to something using the science, telling them about the science, we need to reinforce them into the science, right? We have to give them tools where, again, if they use these tools, teach them some simple principles, that they're going to achieve some positive outcome, and that's paired with the science. And so that's an important piece of, the huge piece of the dissemination. We need the help. Oh, that one came out last. That was one of my favorite articles. Other than the fighting words in ABA, it's called Mr. Positional Power. You need a good smacking. Anybody ever feel like you want to smack somebody that's in positional power where they don't understand the science of human behavior? And this happens in our own field. And understanding that the more you coerce people, the more you try to force people to do something, you win the battle, but you lose the war, right? We need to create an environment where people are producing more reinforcement for themselves. And that's why, Brett and I actually wrote Behavioral Karma, because we have these 5 laws where people can use this stuff to produce better outcomes. But we are already, if you're here, you're likely already equipped with the science of human behavior to make a difference. All right. So let me show you, let me see. That's that. All right. So I want to come in. Am I still sharing? Can you still see my screen? All right. So I ended up, because we are talking about MMA science here. I ended up creating with some colleagues of mine a training and coaching guide for mixed martial arts. And I don't expect anybody here going by it. I don't want to think anybody think for a second I'm trying to hustle you guys selling my book. I'm trying to say that I took some simple science and wrote a freaking book out of it and helped world champions, or wrote another book and helping schools turn around. And you can see those in my books that I put earlier. If I can do it with this simple stuff, any one of you guys can do it anywhere that you want. There's nothing that you can't, nobody that you cannot help with the science. You can. You just got to get in there and do it, right? And somebody might not have paved the path, but it still comes down to, simple things, pinpoint, measurement, feedback, and reinforcement. Those are things that are critical, or what they get, like what we do in the 5 laws. We have pinpointing, goal setting, self-monitoring, right? Helping people recognize their own behavior and report out somebody, and that helps them recruit feedback through reciprocal feedback, and pay for performance, which is just basic positive reinforcement. That's all we're trying to do. Very, very simple stuff we're trying to get these guys in touch with. So this is all rooted out of just good task analysis of critical behaviors that are required in mixed martial arts. Now, this particular book is let me see. Do I have this here? I'll show that. I'll show that to you in a second. So we had to go and identify what we would call pivotal behaviors in the science. And in any sport or anywhere, if you don't understand those, if you don't learn those pivotal behaviors in the beginning, you might engage in a lot of unnecessary and inefficient learning, right? And I forget the research, but there was research that talked about teaching people sight words as opposed to teaching kids sight words as opposed to teaching them blends. And don't quote me on this. I do cite it in maybe 2 of my books because it was profound to me. But instead of teaching a child, a learner, maybe 500 words, you could teach them say 45 blends of words, and they could learn those other 500 words just based off the blend. So it's not just about, teaching something, it's about what are you teaching them? And it's like drawing back a bow, and if the arrow is off a little bit, it's going to fall very wide of the mark. So when in mixed martial arts or in any sports, we really have to get the fundamentals right. For example, like in math, if you don't teach kids their math facts to fluency, it's going to impact everything else they do, because you really need to understand your math facts very well. So understanding those things, all it does is accelerate learning. So with my colleagues, we went back and we identified all the high probability behavior in mixed martial arts. There's research on it. These are the things that people use the most. And then we ended up breaking those things down. Now, this is actually the green belt. We have like yellow belt and orange belt as well. So it goes up. So it starts from the very, very basic, like a jab or having how to hold somebody. And they're all broken down into very, very small skills, which I'll show you in a second. Oh, that would be, and then we created a way for people to score it, right? So let me come here and give you an example. All right. So this is, again, this is a little simpler. We get more detail in some of those, but this was the switch step we call, right? And people would have already learned some skills to get to this point because it's all scaffolded, right? Everything is built, the shaping. We build upon the previous skills, and we broke those down into very kind of specific steps. We have pictures, but we also have videos for people to learn from that describe it. And then we made it so there's a way for people to self-assess. You can self-assess doing that. You can self-assess doing this, right? A little checklist. That's nothing unusual, right? This is a metric. In mixed martial arts, there was no belt ranking. And we created the first belt ranking system in mixed martial arts just using a simple task analysis, because there's so many things you can do with a simple task analysis. As a trainer, you can train people. As a student, you can learn from it. You can be an observer of yourself, check it off. You can take a look at videos, right? And use video feedback and compare yourself to an exemplar to see what you're doing. So you can monitor your own performance. You can then use this stuff to score, right? To find out,
Hi,
to
Dr.
shape a,
Gavoni.
yes.
Sorry, real quick. So we're stuck on the screen that says, now I won't shut up about the science.
Oh, I am so sorry. I'm scrolling through all this. My bad. I'm really sorry, guys. Let me see here. You are screen sharing. Give me a second here. Let me see. Let me stop share there. I'm going to share again. I'm sorry about that, guys. Here we go. Can you see that now?
Beautiful.
Okay. Let me go back to a couple. Let me thank you guys for saying something there. I'm really sorry about that. Let me go back to a couple of things that I was like sharing here. I was saying that, like, for example, this is a task analysis of a skill, the rear naked choke. This is in one of the green belt levels, which means they already had to have learned some other fundamental skills to get here, because all built, and all we did was take and break that skill down, right, into its different components, right? Because you have component behaviors and you have composite behaviors. So you have these things that make up a more complex behavior, and then it's just chained together. And of course, you can teach this forward chaining. You can teach it backwards chaining if you want. By the way, he was really choking me. You see the pain that I was in there? That sucked because we were on video. But so then what I was saying before is a good task analysis can help learners teach themselves, right? Especially if they have a video to go with it, which we created videos for all these. The pictures came right out of those. They can be used for a trainer to teach, because a lot of times you go into the gym and learners don't know what they're learning, and they should know what they're learning. They should have objectives, and those objectives should be broken down into these different techniques, and with this good task analysis, these steps, because this becomes a way for people to learn for themselves. And then all we did was take those and make it into like a simple scorecard, right? Where a learner can check themselves off how well they're doing. Maybe they video themselves doing something and they compare it to the exemplar or the videos that we had there, so they can check those things off. And in the end, what we did was we created belt ranking systems. A couple reasons for those. For gym owners, it's a reinforcer because it keeps people there, right? People want to see achievement. They do. We all do. So, and when you're recognizing your progress, those become like goals that people can work towards. And we need to make progress towards those goals salient. And you can by identifying those techniques and then breaking those techniques down into these task analyses, where they're all broken down in simple components. And then this also gives a real metric for the instructors to actually test their learners, right? So this was the performance scorecard that we had when you go in there, because a lot of times instructors are testing based on their knowledge. This adds precision to their testing by allowing them to give the scorecard and to say, hey, here's what you passed, here's what you didn't. They can literally go back to the scorecard and see, well, I missed that, I missed number 3. They can go back and look at what number 3 is for the snap kick and find out precisely what that was, what the behavior, watch it on a video. It allows them to rep it, practice it, and come back and maybe test that again. Does that make sense to everybody so far? And it's simple. That's not deep science. It's very simple. It's a pinpointed behavior. We had a metric, a way to give feedback to the metric, and a reinforcer, right? The reinforcer, they want to learn the skills, they want to achieve goals and belts and everything. And you can literally do what we did in anything that you do. It's just, looking at it through a behavior lens. And so then we're like, all right, we can't just give that stuff to people, but we have to teach people about how they learn, right? How training occurs, what coaching is. And so that's why we wrote this book that for a learner, because I also think that why shouldn't learners, right, the students in the classrooms, know what kind of coaching they should be getting, what kind of training they should be getting? So we talked about like how skills can be developed, well, a little bit about martial arts, how skills can be developed, what behavior skills training is, right? And because a lot of instructors are engaging in this behavior, but they don't know it's called behavior skills training. They're actually very good at it, a lot of these guys, right? Learn about what good coaching is. And I would just a little takeaway for you guys that Nick, Dr. Nick Weatherland and I, we differentiate, because if you go out into the Google and you Google training and coaching and what's the difference, you'll get like hundreds of different definitions. So I'm like, well, we just need to anchor it functionally, right? That's what we do in the behavior science. So we just say that training is concerned with skill acquisition and coaching is concerned with transference of those skills into natural environment. So it's about the function of what you're doing, because a lot of it's topographically the same. You're still giving feedback. You're still working on targeted behavior. You still have some sort of metric, but one is for developing the skills. The other one is for getting those skills to getting the fighter or whoever it is to perform those skills effectively in the natural environment where they get to touch with some sort of naturally occurring reinforcement. So that way you can fade away and they're going to do it even in your absence. Does that make sense to everybody? And so that's what we did there. Talked about those things, talked about how to use data, talked about how to use the performance evaluation sheet, talked about a little bit of ACT. I love the ACT matrix. I'm not like a ACT guy. I keep it very behavioral. It's just like, all right, what are your reinforcers? Those are your values, and they unpack it. What are those covert behaviors that show up, and how does that impact your overt behaviors? Does that leave you to engage in unproductive behaviors or things that, move you away from your reinforcers or prevent you from accessing those? And, do you get stuck in a loop there because that's negatively reinforcing you because it allows you to temporarily avoid something that's aversive? And then what should you be doing instead? What are those pinpointed behaviors or the behaviors that we need to commit to achieve these valued outcomes? That makes sense, everybody? Again, and it's just you in the middle. They call it psychological flexibility. I call it just observing your own behavior and the impact of your behavior on the environment, the impact of the environment on your behavior, and then initiating the behavior that you've identified as being the behavior that's going to move you closer to those values. So I just keep it very simple behavior. That just works in my mind. Okay. And no offense to any of the ACT people out there, because I freaking love ACT and I love the ACT matrix because it's easy. It's very scalable. And that's what we did there, because I want to help fighters. Fear and anxiety is a very big thing that impacts performance, and we have to give them tools to cope with it. So I think I gave a lot of information, and we have like 9 minutes here, and I'm open for any comments, questions. If I said something stupid, be like, hey, Paul, that was freaking stupid, man. What'd you mean by that? Because if you're thinking it, somebody else probably thinks it. So don't be afraid. I won't be offended. So what do we got here?
Yeah, so we don't have any questions that did roll through, and that's okay. We did have some, just a couple of questions that came in before. And the one question was, what is the difference between training and coaching?
Yeah, that was so earlier. What I was saying was, again, training is where I'm going to create like a training environment, right? And I mean, you can do training in a live environment, right? In vivo training. But if somebody doesn't have the skill, you're going to probably engage in some telling at first, right? You're going to give them some instruction, some modeling, and you're going to get them to engage in that behavior and try to reinforce it. But you're going to switch, and you can switch from training and coaching on a dime, where you stop telling, right, instructing, and you begin engaging and questioning and helping them to better observe their own behavior and the impact of their environment, their behavior on the environment. So it's very simple. Like coaching, questioning is a very, very powerful strategy. And the question should be, the behavioral questions. What are you doing? How is that moving you towards your goal, right? How is your behavior impacting that goal or moving you forward? How is that aligned with, whatever that we've set up in terms of your performance? So yeah, it's a very, very simple thing to do, but just know that training is different functionally than coaching. Training is about helping somebody develop skills. Coaching is about helping somebody get in touch with reinforcement for engaging those skills in the natural environment. That makes sense to everybody?
Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you for clarifying. We did have one other question because, DBA is about dissemination. So how can we, as, where we're at in our career, wherever we're at, how can we break into, another field with this science?
Oh, listen, I love this question. And I love it because you guys had the freaking baddest ass science in the world. I mean this so much. And what I've learned is you can't go in telling somebody all the accoutrements of the science and everything that you can do for them with it. Okay. You want to go in, and there's actually a great book called Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. And the word selling is aversive to me, and spinning is aversive, but it's like the largest scale research that's ever been done on selling. Essentially, we are kind of selling a science, right? But we're not selling like a used car to somebody. We're trying to help sell people on the idea that this is something that's going to help people live a more productive life. That's exactly what Brett and I did with behavioral karma. It's making it palatable, helping people understand that this is what you can do in your life, the behavior that you can engage in every day that can not only help yourself, but that can have a ripple effect towards your valued outcomes. But the selling part comes about finding out what people's reinforcers are, right? Don't you want to know don't you do that with your learner when you go in? You're like, what are the reinforcers? What do they prefer, right? Preference assessment. When you find out what's important to people, then you can start to find out what it is that you can do to help them access those things. And so by virtue of doing that, you end up reinforcing them into or pairing the science with reinforcement. Anytime you can help somebody achieve success, and then maybe afterwards explain some of the scientific principles to it, you're pairing that stuff with science. But whatever you're doing right now, if you like crocheting, I say, maybe somebody loves crocheting. You can become the baddest ass crocheter in the world by using the science, or you can help somebody else become great at doing that thing just with doing those simple things that I outlined there. Doesn't have to be deep stuff. So the more you can help yourself or others, especially in your area right now. If you're working in the behavior analytic field right now, great. I'm sure that your organization can be better. Even if they're great, they can even be greater, right? And so what can they do more or less or differently to achieve those valued outcomes? And, organizational behavior management, how can we be better leaders, better training, better onboarding, better branding? How can we have better, standard operating procedures, that reduce effort for people? How can we produce better valued outcomes for our learners or the clients that we're serving? So all that stuff becomes very powerful, preparing, but like never take off your behavior lens. And when you feel yourself getting frustrated with a colleague not performing, think about what is maintaining their behavior. There's something that's maintaining their behavior. Put it on your performance diagnostic checklist lens, right? Is it a skill deficit or is it a will deficit? And so how can we treat that differently? Because the environment is getting exactly the behavior that's meant to be there. We should never take the lens off.
Oh, I love that. And Julie also had a question, and she's
Hello,
asking.
Julie. Julie's
she's
awesome. Julie is one of those people that are down there. I think Julie probably hits that whole continuum where I'm like, yeah, I'm more kind of floating to the top. Julie probably hits the whole spectrum from researcher all the way to the top to dissemination. So glad to see you in here, Julie.
Beautiful words. You're so lucky, Julie. All right. Julie's question is, do you have advice for speaking with and talking to sport coaches about how they can use the science to improve their coaching behavior in a meaningful way?
Yep. So this is where one of those things where I would go out there and you got to pair. You got to find all the good shit that coach is doing good, right? And it'd be like, you're doing this and we call that. And you might start dropping a couple little scientific words in there. But if you go in there and tell them everything that they should be doing, you're out. You're pairing yourself with something aversive and nobody wants that. So you would never do that with your learner, right? Isn't one of the first things that we do with our clients is go in there and pair? So it's no different. That's what I mean about keep your behavior lens on. Go in there and pair with them. And then you want to find a quick win, right? Like what I wrote the book on, or we'll just think about it as behavioral momentum. What can you do to get that? What little tweak can you help that coach do that's going to help them produce some sort of meaningful outcome for them? You do that thing and you got them. And usually like the coaches are like, they don't understand, again, like they're telling people too many things at once. They don't understand about working on a couple of behaviors at a time. They tell too much and they need to shift the questioning. They don't use data to shape some stuff. And if you come in there and say, we need to do this data, if the response effort's too much for them and it takes them too long to produce that positive reinforcement, they're not going to want you around. So again, you got to look for some quick wins with them. What's something easy and I know you can go out there and find it because coaches aren't equipped with the science of human behavior. And that's what I mean. Like any one of us can go into any sports, any professional sports, anywhere, and I mean this passionately, and make a difference. I know that there's so many people that have metrics like basketball. Everything they do, there's measures. I know we can go find that tweak and figure out how they can make it better because they're really working at the highest level, and those small tweaks can make that little bit of difference that are going to really produce that valued outcome for those guys. And we can be involved in all aspects, anything that they're doing, from recruiting, from their onboarding process to the recruiting to the training to the coaching. We really should be side by side with these coaches, helping them leverage the science of human behavior to accelerate the performance of their athletes.
All right.
I got a question here from Brandon here.
Perfect.
Yeah, you brought up the fear and anxiety as something that can affect porn. Yeah, and I have seen many good fighters struggle with this. I have also seen this affect porn in other sports as well. You attempt to recreate the environment. Yeah, Brandon, that's a great question, man. Super great question. And the answer is yes, right? So I want to safely create that environment and to the best that I can. It's impossible to replicate the actual fight environment because your record's on the line. You're fighting in front of sometimes, whoever is millions of people. But what you can do is you can get them as close as possible to that. Like we have like crowd noise. We go fight. We go spar people in other gyms because that creates fear and anxiety in them. Which is huge for them. That's a big part of it. Put them under conditions where again they can successfully engage in the behavior and get in touch with lots of reinforcement. Right. So the more you get in touch with lots of reinforcement while you're sparring, the less your fear impacts your performance, and that becomes actually good. And the anxiety you incur there actually improves your performance. But you got to make sure that they're not getting there and taking a beating. So that's why, like with our bout ranking and having stuff like that, you can kind of gauge where somebody's at, and then put them in those conditions where they're getting high repetition, where they can safely accelerate that performance as you start to add in more variables in that environment. We're like, oh, I got this, man. And defense, by the way, huge reinforcer for people, right? The more people feel safe because they can defend well, the more they'll be able to access their whole repertoire of offensive techniques. And a lot of people want to get in there and just fight and use their offense, but it's really about defense. That defense slows the game down for people, so it allows them to access all their different skills. That's a mistake that some people make there. Oh, and by the way, when I train people, I would advise in all sports, I don't teach people to come out with their hands up. And for some fighters, you'll understand this because everybody teaches that way. The better way to do it is start with people's natural repertoire, right? I teach them to start with their hands down, with their jab down, with the right hand by their chest, because what happens is when their hands are up, people think, well, they're going to develop a bad habit of keeping their hands down. But what they end up doing is they end up throwing short punches. They end up shrugging their shoulder. They end up wasting unnecessary energy. And when you do it that way, which is backwards in the traditional way, people learn quicker. They're getting in touch with reinforcement more because their jab extends more, and they end up hitting people more, which is a big reinforcer, right? And they end up getting hit less because they're in control more. And if you go back and study the exemplars, I can look at a ton of fighters that fought with their hand down, and you look at their body style, like Muhammad Ali, Roy Jones Jr., James Toney, Larry Holmes. All these guys leveraged their genetic predisposition to be able to maximize the reinforcement they were producing, hitting people in the fight. Does that make sense to everybody? Like the same way Tyson had to learn head movement to get inside so he could leverage his genetic predisposition of being like stocky and short and very powerful on his legs. So, helping, people identify what's going to work for them. So great question, Brandon. Thank you. Oh, so Annette, so how do you adjust the skill deficit? And we talk about this in Behavior Karma and some of my articles. But if you've never heard about, I have a handful of tools and I see everything through these lens, and the performance diagnostic checklist is definitely one of those. It's really the 4-term contingency just on a 2-pager. And like a simple way you can know if it's a skill is like, can you tell me what you're supposed to do? Can you show me what you're supposed to do, right? If they can tell you and show you, and can they do it quickly? Because it might have to do with fluency, right? And if it has to do with fluency, it just means you got to increase repetition for them. But if they can tell you, but they can't show you, well, it's a skill deficit, right? You have to get them to do it. So that's a very simple way to address that. If it's a learner, you might think about, well, because some learners don't do well in their tests, for example. Well, maybe they don't have the skills. Well, what you do is you find some sort of reinforcer for them, and you try to get them to engage in the skill to see if they produce a better outcome for access to that reinforcer, and that will let you know if it's a skill versus will. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Well, I'm so thankful for. I hope I delivered what you guys came for. I'm thankful to have the opportunity to speak to everybody. I really hope that you have a chance to connect with me on LinkedIn under Paul Gavoni, or Instagram, Dr. Paulie Gloves, or Facebook, Paulie Gloves. I also, because it's about dissemination, Brett and I wrote this book, Behavior Karma, because we want to disseminate. We made it as cheap as possible for everybody because it's about the practical application of the science of human behavior for helping people produce positive outcome for themselves and others. And so take a look at the book if you have a chance. If you don't, do something on your own, right? Do something, write an article, do a little video, share some sort of success that you're having, because when people see that you're having success using the science of human behavior, like, I need to learn more about this. And it really just helps you disseminate more. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Selena, Shauna. Thank you guys. Yeah. Thank you guys very much for having me. Yeah. Thank you, Brandon. Great question, Trina. Everybody. Yep. Thank you. I'm going to keep saying thank you because it's always nice. Thanks, Gabrielle. Brina, yep. Julie, thanks for coming.
All right, thanks everyone. I'm gonna be closing the room.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend, y'all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.